You didn't tell the president that you had cancer, that you were being treated for cancer, or that the treatment for that cancer had gone wrong, because you saw it as personal and medical. And I think a lot of us have empathy for you in that regard. But now that you see how personal medical decisions are, will you call for the re-recruitment, restoration of full rank and back pay for the 8,600 service members who were vax mandated out of the military?
No, I won't.
So on March 4th, 2021, you authored a memo. It was entitled Message to the Force. And in that memo, you said that there would be clear and swift accountability for anyone who didn't meet the highest standards of the Department of Defense. Now, however this worked out, we all acknowledge that what you did here didn't meet the highest standards, right? You made a mistake.
I admitted to...
Yeah, okay, so we got that. So then the question is, what becomes the clear and swift accountability? Now, you're not going to be discharged, right? No?
That's right.
Okay, you're not going to be suspended. You're not going to be demoted, and you're not going to have your pay cut. None of those things are going to happen to you, right?
That's right.
Okay, so you come here seeking some grace and some forgiveness. And I want you to know that one of the service members who you vax mandated out of the military sent me the parable of the unforgiving debtor. And it's in the book of Matthew, it's verses 21 to 35. The man fell down before his king and begged him, "Please be patient with me, and I will pay all the debt." Then his master, filled with pity for him, released him and forgave him of his debt. But when the man left the king, he went to a fellow servant who owed him a few $1,000s. He grabbed him by the throat and demanded payment. His fellow servant sat down and begged him for a little more time. "Be patient with me, and I will pay it," he pleaded. But his creditor would not wait. He had the man arrested and put in prison until the debt could be paid in full. When some of the other servants saw this, they were very upset. They went to the king and told him everything that had happened. And the king called the man who had been forgiven and said, "You evil servant, I forgave you that tremendous debt because you pleaded with me. Shouldn't you have mercy on your fellow servant, just as I had mercy on you?" Then the angry king sent the man to prison to be tortured until he had paid his entire debt. Mr. Secretary, you come to us seeking forgiveness, but you offer none. And it seems as though the pattern is repeated. You make a mistake, like on the vax mandate and here regarding your notification, then you get busted. President Biden had to sign something into law reversing your vax mandate. You got busted here, not because you came forward, but because we learned of this through other means. And then after you get busted making a mistake, you want that benefit, but you don't want to extend it to others. This isn't swift or clear. You're not meeting your own standards that you set for yourself. And you say that the DOD is a learning organization. Haven't you learned yet that the military is weaker, not stronger, with the 8,600 people that you vax mandated out of the military?
Just one point, Congressman. The reason I'm here is because the chairman requested that I appear to talk about the circumstances surrounding my hospitalization.
But don't you see the hypocrisy in it? Because you screwed up, we fix your screw up, and now you want grace. But these people who sought religious exemptions, they got no such grace. And also, I just think it's ridiculous that we're in 3 wars. You went AWOL for 3 days, and we get 2 hours with you. If you can't spend more than 2 hours answering these questions, I don't know how you really operate in all these wars.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair, I recognize the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Gates.
Let's stay on the same subject. Ms. Locken just said there'll be about 1,000 U.S. service members operating a peer system off of Gaza. How many of them will have guns, Mr. Secretary?
Well, typically all of the deployed service members carry guns, and they have the ability to protect themselves if challenged.
So if someone from land in Gaza shoots at our service members who are on the $320 million pier that we're building, you're telling me our service members can shoot back?
They have the right to return fire to protect themselves. Now,
well, do we think that's like? So now I want to move to the likelihood that you think someone from land in Gaza might shoot at our service members on this pier. Do you think that that's a likely scenario?
That's possible, yes. This
is a very telling moment, Mr. Secretary, because you've said something that's quite possible that could happen, right? Shots from Gaza on our service members, and then the response, our armed service members shooting live fire into Gaza. That is a possible outcome here so that we can become the Port Authority and run this pier. Right?
That's correct. I expect that we will always have the ability to protect ourselves. Don't you think that counts as
boots on the ground? President Biden told the country that we weren't going to have boots on the ground in Gaza.
And we won't.
Okay, but you guys parse the distinction between, like when Americans think boots on the ground, they think Americans in harm's way or engaged actively in a conflict. You guys seem to be sort of saying that boots on a pier connected to the ground, connected to service members shooting into Gaza, doesn't count as boots on the ground?
It does not.
I think you're going to find the American people have a different perspective on that. And if we're going to have people shooting into Gaza, we probably should have a vote on that, pursuant to our war powers. But I want to bring us now closer to home and the F-35 program. Is the F-35 program a failure?
No, it's...
Okay, so let's go over, how much does an F-35 cost?
Well, it depends on the variant, but...
100 million? Safe to say? 100 million a copy? Okay, so we just had the Air Force in here, and I said, what percentage of these F-35s are fully mission capable? And they said 29%. Do you have any basis to disagree with that assessment?
I don't have any basis to disagree with the Secretary.
So at 100 million a copy, 29% being fully mission capable, does that seem low to you?
It's a complex airframe, and again, there are a number of reasons why a platform could be not operational at any one given time. But
right, but I mean, how many?
Having said that, it is one of the best aircraft in the inventory.
The best aircraft in the inventory. Well, Mr. Secretary, there's a GAO report that takes a very different view. Mr. Chairman, I seek unanimous consent to enter the GAO report entitled F-35 sustainment costs will continue to rise while planned use and availability have decreased.
Without objection, so ordered.
It reads, costs to sustain the F-35 fleet keep increasing from $1.1 trillion in 2018 to $1.58 trillion in 2023. Yet DoD plans to fly the F-35 less than originally estimated, partly because of reliability issues with the aircraft. The F-35's ability to perform its mission has also trended downward over the last 5 years. Is there any of that in the GAO report that you disagree with?
I don't, no.
Okay, so how many $100 million paperweights do we own?
I would not categorize the F-35 as a paperweight.
Well, if it's not mission capable, if it's, what do we just stare at it and admire it?
We continue to work to make sure that we get our aircraft operational and continue to. And
I don't know. Don't you think at 100 million a clip, more than 29% should be fully operational? And if the fact that we can't get them operational, you know what Secretary Kendall said when he was sitting in that chair? He said the core root of the problem is that we had let Lockheed Martin build this thing, and then we gave Lockheed Martin the full system performance contract, and they keep bilking us according to the GAO, and we sit around staring at a $100 million airplane that can't fully perform the mission, and you're sitting here telling me it's not a failure. Just own up to it, Mr. Secretary. Just say, this airframe has not delivered, it's too costly, it's not being utilized as we should, and we should never again make the mistake of doing a full system performance contract with the very person who built the aircraft. Could we agree to that?
I agree. In the future, we should have a different approach. I'm sure that Secretary Kendall also
I
told
think
you
the committee is going to
the things that he was doing to get the
approach quite quickly.
Yeah.
Gentlemen's time's expired. Let me give people our situational awareness. Votes have been called. There's a series of 9 votes, 6 amendment votes are 2 minutes. My plan is to continue for about another 15 minutes before we recess and then come back at the conclusion of the votes. The walk-off time will be 12:30. With that, Chair, I recognize the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Moulton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, you said your budget priorities are near-term readiness, modernization, and support for troops and families. Those absolutely seem like the right priorities for me. Chairman, you've famously said, quote, accelerate change or lose. And of course, you're talking about our pacing challenge, China primarily. But, Mr. Secretary, you also explained that your budget, quote, dials back some modernization. Now, how is that compatible with accelerate change or lose?
So those platforms that won't deliver capability before 2030 are the ones that we chose not to invest in this budget. Now, we recognize that we will invest in those programs in the out years, and that'll require an increase in the top line.
Mr. Chairman, most of this committee is in wholehearted agreement that this budget is inadequate, but why would you delay modernization rather than following the lead of the Marine Corps and just cutting old systems, many of which are big and expensive to maintain?
Well, that's part of the dialogue we have with our Congress, and that's somewhat the challenge that I see in some cases where, as we look at the capabilities that we have to have today, at the same time, as we transform the force to the future, and balancing between the two, and that's where the focus has been across the force. This is an area that we got to continue to have dialogue of the things that we were willing to let go of, so we can actually invest in and modernize in the future.
Well, I have no doubt that this is your philosophy. I question whether it is really the focus across the force. I mean, I think with the exception of the Marine Corps, and a bit of credit is due to the Air Force as well here, there's been a real reluctance to divest of old platforms. I mean, I asked this question of Army leadership just last week. I said, give me an example of one old platform that you're cutting to make room for modernization. And the Secretary of the Army used the Future Reconnaissance Attack Aircraft, a future capability. She's talking about cutting a future capability. Can you give me, Mr. Secretary, just a couple of examples of old weapon systems that are big and expensive to maintain that the Army is cutting to make room for modernization?
Well, certainly, I mean, if you had the Secretary of the Army here to speak to that, I'm sure that what she told you is accurate. So I won't challenge that. But there are things like older artillery platforms, like the M777 that we provided to Ukraine, that we no longer use in our inventory to the extent that we were before. That we are, that we're moving out of the inventory. But some of these things that are no longer useful for the Army are useful to us in the next fight. As far as the Army is concerned, we're able to transition those items to partners and allies who need that kind of capability.
Well, let's do that. I mean, let's sell them. Let's get some money, right? But we've got to make money in our budget for modernization, because if we don't accelerate change, not just change at the rate that we're changing right now, but accelerate change, we are not going to be able to keep up with China. And, Mr. Secretary, I just want to be clear. You are endorsing the Secretary of the Army's response to my question, name an old system you're cutting, when she named a future system that you've chosen not to invest in.
No, the reason I said what I said was I really don't know the full context of, but to your point, that is a future system and not a system that we would typically look to divest of. The systems that we want to divest are the systems that are too expensive to upgrade, to modernize, or no longer relevant in the future fight. Now,
I mean, we live in a world where $5,000 drones can destroy $5 million tanks. Now, I'm not saying there's never going to be a use for a tank again, but we're still building a lot of tanks. Poland has just agreed to purchase a whole bunch of tanks. I don't know what nation they plan to invade with these largely offensive weapons, but that doesn't seem like a very wise investment for us or our allies. So I would just encourage you. I know there are a lot of tank supporters in Congress. There are a lot of F-35 supporters in Congress. But you've got to come to us with tough cuts, because coming here and just saying we can't modernize is not acceptable. Replicator is a good example of a revolutionary change. But when they came before the committee, I asked them, Ukraine is innovating a lot on drones. Just tell me, when is Replicator program, with our GDP, going to catch up with Ukraine that has 0.7% of our GDP? And they said, at the present pace, we're not. We can't beat China at that rate.
Gentlemen's time's expired. Chair,